Romulo was walking through the night when he heard a crying sound. A little girl was crying, saying, "I'm hungry, Mommy." A man then approached the woman, who asked him for something to eat, but instead of help, she received insults. Witnessing the scene, Romulo made a decision that would change his life forever. Romulo sat alone in his office, staring at the papers in front of him, which now seemed meaningless. The room, filled with memories of a dream that was about to unravel, echoed with a painful silence. He had just announced the closure of his restaurant, a place that had been more than a business to him, it was a passion. The meeting with the staff had been difficult.
Romulo stood up.
His posture tried to convey firmness, but his eyes betrayed the sadness he felt. He began by thanking everyone. "I want to start by thanking each of you who stood by Rose Gourmet over the past 5 years. Without you, none of this would have been possible. You were not just employees, you were the backbone of this place." The faces around him showed a mix of anxiety and expectation. Some murmured among themselves, anticipating what was to come. Romulo continued, his voice choked with emotion. "Unfortunately, I have to announce that in 2 weeks we will be closing our doors for good. I know this may come as a shock, but I assure you that your rights will be fully respected. I hope we can count on the same effort and dedication until the very last day." The initial murmur turned into a heavy silence. Surprised faces and some tearful looks could be seen among the staff. They slowly dispersed, some returning to work, others still digesting the news. After the meeting, Romulo returned to his office, sitting again in the chair that had so often been his refuge during long nights of work. It wasn't long before Emily, the manager, came into the room with a supportive expression. She said, "You gave a beautiful speech, Romulo. I want you to know that I'll be here until we close the doors. You're not alone in this." Romulo gave a sad smile and thanked her. "Emily, your dedication has always gone beyond expectations. I don't know how to thank you for everything." There was a pause, and the silence between them spoke as much as their words. Emily, hesitant, broke the silence. "May I ask why exactly we are closing?" "Yes, the number of customers has decreased, but it seemed like we still had a chance to recover." Romulo sighed deeply before answering, "Yes, the decline wasn't so critical that we couldn't recover, but I made a serious mistake. I trusted someone I shouldn't have, and it cost us dearly. It's my fault, Emily, and I deeply regret that this affects all of you." Emily realized that Romulo preferred not to go into details and respected his silence. She merely nodded, placing her hand briefly on his shoulder before leaving the room, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Romulo stayed there, brooding not only over what had happened but also over all the choices that had led him to this moment. Every wrong decision seemed to shout in his mind, and guilt consumed him. He thought about the faces of his employees, the trust they had placed in him, and how all of it was about to be undone. The following days at the restaurant were a mix of normalcy and melancholy. The staff continued to serve the customers with the usual excellence, but there was an air of farewell in every gesture, in every smile. Romulo made a point of being present, helping where he could, trying to memorize every detail of the place that would soon be just a memory. As the final day approached, the reality of what was happening began to sink in. Romulo knew that, after the doors closed, everyone would go their separate ways. He just hoped that somehow he could find redemption for his mistakes and that their paths would cross again under better circumstances. Romulo quickened his pace as the cold night wind cut through his coat. With only a week left before closing his restaurant, Rose Gourmet, the sadness of the situation weighed on his shoulders more than the harsh winter. Walking briskly towards the garage where his car was parked, he barely noticed the few people still on the streets at that hour. As he neared his car, a subtle yet piercing sound caught his attention. It was a faint, restrained cry coming from a nearby corner. Romulo slowed his pace, letting his ears guide his movements to the source of the sound. His heart broke at the sight, a mother and her young daughter, evidently homeless, huddled against the wall of a building. The little girl was crying, "I'm hungry, Mommy." The mother, with tired, sorrowful eyes, softly replied, "I know, dear, I know, but we don't have any food right now." Romulo watched silently as the girl, with a look of helplessness, asked, Why do so many people pass us with full bags and no one gives us anything? The mother, trying to explain the complex situation in simple terms to her daughter, said, "Sometimes people are good, dear, but they're afraid of being tricked." At that moment, a man approached. The mother reached out to him and asked with a trembling voice, "Sir, please, could you give something for my daughter to eat?" The man gave a quick, distrustful glance at the mother and daughter before turning his eyes away and continuing on his way. He passed by Romulo and commented dismissively, "She thinks she's fooling me, she brought her daughter just to get money and spend it in the bars." Romulo remained thoughtful after the man walked away. The girl's cry echoed in his mind, pure and painful. The scene before him sparked a deep compassion. He knew that the desperation of that child was not fake, it was the real expression of hunger and suffering. Overcome by a sudden resolution, he approached. Romulo went back to his car and drove to the restaurant, which would still be open for a few more days. Upon arrival, he did not hesitate. He entered, turned on the lights, and went directly to the kitchen. He quickly heated up some pastries in the industrial oven, prepared cheese breads, and carefully packed everything in a bag along with a soda. Returning to his car, he drove back to the spot where the mother and daughter were taking shelter. With a gentle smile, he approached them and handed over the bag. The mother, surprised and moved, could barely find the words. Tears of gratitude shone in her eyes as she said, "Thank you so much, sir. May God bless you." The little girl, her eyes wide with surprise and her mouth already full of cheese bread, murmured a muffled thank you. Romulo, watching the small scene of relief and happiness, couldn't help but smile. "Eat well, okay? And take care," Romulo said, his voice carrying a mix of joy and melancholy. He walked away, heading back to his car, feeling a bit lighter. The satisfaction of having done something concrete to alleviate someone's suffering warmed his heart on that cold night. As he drove back home, Romulo reflected on the difficult days ahead with the restaurant's closure. But that small act of kindness brought a glimmer of hope and humanity to his spirit. The following day was a blur of activities as Romulo organized the final details for the restaurant's closure. However, the image of the mother and daughter stayed with him, serving as a painful but necessary reminder of the harsh realities many face and the positive impact that small gestures can have. The day after his act of kindness, Emily, the restaurant manager, approached Romulo with a practical yet meaningful proposal. She found him reviewing some notes and documents in his office, with the morning light filtering through the dusty windows. "Romulo, we have enough food for another week in stock," Emily began, her concern evident. "Could we delay the closure by a few days? It would be a waste to let it all go to waste." Romulo, still weighed down by the decision to close the restaurant, sighed deeply before responding. "How many days do you think we need, Emily?" "About 3 more days should be enough to use everything up," she replied hopefully. "All right," Romulo agreed, in a resigned tone. "We'll close in a week and 3 days." With the new deadline set, Romulo had to go out to handle some matters related to the sale of the restaurant. Walking through the busy streets of the city, he reflected on the impending sale. The buyer was a wealthy businessman from the area, known for his relentless forays into real estate. This man had no interest in preserving the legacy of Rose Gourmet. Instead, he planned to demolish the establishment to build a parking lot, claiming it would be more profitable. Romulo hated the idea. The restaurant had been his dream, his passion turned into reality, but accumulated debts and financial circumstances had pushed him into this unpleasant decision. As he collected the necessary documents for the transaction, his mind was torn between resignation and sadness. After handling the bureaucracy, Romulo retraced his steps, passing by the street where he had encountered the mother and daughter the day before. He noticed the area was empty, except for the two of them, still there, struggling to survive under the scorching midday sun. Approaching them, he heard the girl, worried, asking her mother, "Mommy, are you okay?" The woman tried to smile at her daughter, saying, "I'm fine, dear." However, as Romulo got closer, he noticed the woman's pallor and white lips, clear signs of weakness. Concerned, he asked, "Are you really okay?" She tried to hide her condition. "I am, Thank you for asking. The girl, however, looked at Romulo with sincere eyes and revealed. My mommy hasn't eaten anything in 3 days. She left all the food for me. At this confession, Romulo's concern turned into immediate action. He couldn't simply walk away knowing that reality. Come with me, Romulo said, leading them to his car. Without hesitation, the mother and daughter got in. Back at the restaurant, the sight of the two in dirty and torn clothes attracted curious glances from the staff. Romulo, however, was determined to help them. He spoke directly to Emily. Emily, take them to the staff kitchen and prepare something nutritious for them to eat. Emily, who knew Romulo's kind heart well, asked no questions. Sure, I'll take care of it right away. As Emily guided the mother and daughter to the kitchen, Romulo watched. He knew that the restaurant situation was irreversible, but that didn't stop him from making a difference while he still could. The kitchen quickly filled with the comforting aromas of a meal being prepared with care and attention. The staff were surprised, but the atmosphere shifted from surprise to understanding as the story of the two visitors spread. Amid the bustle, Romulo felt a mix of emotions. The sadness over the imminent loss of the restaurant still plagued him, but seeing his team come together to help those in need brought an unexpected solace. The mother, now fed and visibly stronger, thanked Romulo with simple yet deeply grateful words. The little girl, with a shy smile, seemed relieved to see her mother regaining her strength. As the day came to an end, Romulo reflected on the recent events. Difficult decisions remained, but he was resolute in his commitment to doing good while he could, even if it didn't change the inevitable. The night fell over the city, and the restaurant, illuminated from within, was a small bastion of hope and humanity amid the harsh reality of the world outside. Romulo stood in front of his office, contemplating the decision he needed to make, when he called Emily for an urgent and personal conversation. At that moment, the restaurant was calm, a brief pause in the daily hustle that preceded the imminent closure. Emily, do you think we could arrange a space in the restaurant for Anna and Luana to stay temporarily? Romulo asked, his expression a mix of concern and hope. Of course, Romulo. We have that storage area we no longer use. With a little work, we can turn it into a small room, Emily replied promptly, embracing the idea. Thank you, Emily. That means a lot to me, and I'm sure it will to them as well, Romulo said, visibly relieved. With the help of other staff members, Emily quickly organized the space. They cleaned the area, set up a comfortable mattress, some kitchen utensils, and even added a few personal items to make the space more inviting. The small storage area was transformed into a modest but cozy refuge. Once everything was ready, Romulo went to speak with Anna and Luana, who were still adjusting to the activity in the restaurant. Anna looked at Romulo with eyes full of gratitude and introduced herself and her daughter. I'm Anna, and this is Luana. We have no words to thank you for what you're doing for us, Anna said, her voice choked with emotion. No need to thank me, Anna. We've set up a small space for you here. You can stay until we need to close the restaurant, in just over a week, Romulo explained, trying to keep his voice steady despite the weight of his words. Anna nodded in understanding and thanked him again for the opportunity, even knowing it was temporary. The workday at the restaurant continued as usual, but as closing time approached, Romulo became contemplative. The restaurant key weighed heavily in his pocket, a small piece of metal carrying significant decisions. He remembered the person who had deceived him before, a painful reminder of his losses. With that memory still fresh, he sought out Emily to ask for her opinion. Emily, I'm thinking about leaving the key with Anna. What do you think? Romulo asked. Emily pondered for a moment before responding. Well, Romulo, the restaurant is closing anyway, and it wouldn't hurt anyone. It could be a good way to show that we trust her. Romulo nodded, convinced by Emily's words and his own intuition. He knew that by giving the key to Anna, she would have full access to the restaurant, with the freedom to use or even take the utensils. However, something in his interaction with Anna and Luana made him want to trust them. As he walked back to the makeshift space, he saw Luana already asleep on the mattress, a sight that softened his heart. Anna was sitting beside her daughter, watching over her peaceful sleep. Anna, I'm going to leave this key with you. For safety reasons, it's not good for you to be locked inside here, Romulo said, handing her the key. Anna, surprised and touched by the gesture, accepted the key with a shy smile. Thank you, Romulo. Your trust means a lot to us. We'll take good care of everything here. With a nod and a sense of peace, Romulo left the restaurant that night. He drove home, reflecting on the events of the day. The decision to trust Anna, despite his past experiences, brought him a sense of relief and tranquility. That night, he slept deeply, comforted by the thought of having done something good, something beyond transactions and losses, something genuinely humane. The next morning, upon returning to Rose Gourmet, Romulo was surprised by an unexpected scene. The restaurant, which usually awaited his supervision for the morning cleaning, was immaculately arranged. Curious and somewhat confused, he soon discovered that Anna, the woman he had helped and temporarily housed in the establishment, was responsible for the transformation. You didn't have to do this, Anna. You and your daughter are our guests here, Romulo said, genuinely touched by her gesture. Anna smiled, somewhat fatigued but clearly satisfied to have been able to help. I felt a bit better during the night and couldn't sleep. Cleaning helped me feel useful. It's the least I could do to thank you for your hospitality, she explained as she adjusted a dish towel over her shoulder. Grateful but still surprised, Romulo nodded, appreciating Anna's unexpected reciprocity. The day began like any other, with the team preparing for another work shift. However, it wasn't long before Romulo started to feel unusually unwell. In the middle of the day, without warning, he began to vomit, an unusual occurrence that quickly drew Emily's attention. The manager, always efficient and concerned, insisted that he seek medical help. Emily, you're pale and clearly not well. Let me take you to the hospital, Emily said, with a concerned firmness. Despite his initial reluctance, Romulo's condition left no room for protest. Emily drove his car to the nearest hospital, where he was promptly attended. After a series of seemingly endless tests, the doctor finally returned with a calm demeanor, reporting that nothing physically wrong had been found. Have you been under any severe stress recently? The doctor asked, with an inquisitive look. Romulo hesitated, then nodded. He opened up about the stress of the past few weeks, from the decision to close the restaurant to caring for Anna and Luana, as well as his own financial troubles. The doctor listened attentively before giving his diagnosis. Your body is reacting to accumulated stress. You need to rest, Romulo. I recommend you take at least a week off to recover your strength, the doctor advised, with a serious tone. With the consultation finished, Romulo found Emily in the waiting room and shared the doctor's advice with her. The doctor said, I need to rest. I think I'll need to leave you in charge of the restaurant until we close, Romulo confessed, his voice heavy with resignation. Emily nodded with understanding and support. You need to take care of yourself now, Romulo. Don't worry about the restaurant, I'll handle everything. Come back only when you feel better, even if that means after we close. Grateful, Romulo expressed his appreciation before Emily helped him back home. Once at home, he surrendered to the necessary rest, falling into a deep sleep that lasted until the next day. Waking up the next morning, Romulo felt a slight improvement, but the concern for the restaurant and his team still lingered in his thoughts. However, he knew following the doctor's advice was essential. Lying in bed, he reflected on the turbulent days, feeling a mix of gratitude and melancholy thinking about Emily managing the restaurant in his absence. Even away, his heart remained there, among the pots and dishes, hoping for a good ending. Over the following days, Romulo dedicated himself entirely to resting. The doctor's instructions were clear, to rest and stay away from the tensions marking the impending closure of Rose Gourmet. Emily, ever attentive and dedicated, made daily visits to Romulo's home but maintained a silent pact not to bring up restaurant matters in their conversations. She wanted to ensure Romulo had the peaceful environment he needed to fully recover. On a particularly serene afternoon, while they shared coffee on Romulo's porch, he felt it was time to open his heart about the events leading to the sad fate of his beloved restaurant. Emily, I know we promised not to talk about work, Romulo began hesitantly, but I feel I owe you an explanation about everything that happened, about why the restaurant is closing. Emily set her coffee cup aside, her gaze softened by understanding. If it's too personal, Romulo, you don't have to open up if you're not ready. Romulo shook his head, in a determined gesture. No, I need to talk about it, I need to get it out. Some time ago, I attended an entrepreneur exhibition, looking for inspiration to improve Rose. That's where I met Deborah. Romulo paused, the memory still vivid and painful. She bumped into me by accident, apologizing and saying she was so absorbed in the news that she didn't even see where she was going. We started talking, and amazingly, we discovered we shared the same dreams of growing our businesses. She had a clothing store. In the days that followed, our relationship progressed rapidly, and soon I found myself falling in love. Romulo sighed, his voice trembling slightly as he recounted the sequence of events. After 3 months, Deborah came to me with an investment proposal that seemed perfect. She showed how the money we had already invested had yielded returns. The prospect of more profit was tempting, and driven by trust and love, I ended up using not only my savings but also the restaurant's funds and a substantial loan. The anguish in his voice was palpable as he reached the most painful part of the story. The day after our last investment, Deborah disappeared. Phones, emails, any trace of her had vanished. There wasn't even a record of a woman with her full name. That's when I realized I had fallen for a scam. Romulo's final words came out as a sigh, the weight of months of distress reflected in his tired face. Emily, moved by a mix of anger and empathy for her friend, stood up and embraced him. Romulo allowed himself to be comforted, his heavy breathing echoing in the comforting silence that followed. It must have been incredibly hard, Emily said gently, offering the kind of support that only a true friend could provide. But you're not alone, Romulo. I'll be here for you, no matter what happens. Emily's embrace brought Romulo not only comfort but also the strength to face the coming days. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but with Emily's support, he felt he could begin to heal the wounds of the past. In the following days, as Romulo continued his period of rest, his mind frequently returned to that conversation. Emily, in turn, kept her promise, taking care of the restaurant and all the preparations for the closure while keeping Romulo informed only of the essentials, ensuring he didn't become overwhelmed. As the last day of Rose Gourmet approached, Romulo felt increasingly ready to return, not just to say goodbye to his dream but also to personally thank everyone who had stood by him, especially Emily, whose loyalty and friendship proved invaluable in the midst of the storm. Romulo was back behind the wheel of his car, feeling a mix of emotions as he drove toward the restaurant that had been his dream and pride for so long. The week of rest recommended by the doctor had passed, and he had recovered, although he still carried the sadness of the impending farewell to Rose Gourmet. As he approached, he noticed something unexpected that instantly stirred his curiosity and confusion. A huge line was snaking in front of the restaurant, much larger than he had ever seen. Intrigued, Romulo parked the car and got out, looking at the crowd that seemed to be eagerly waiting for something. He walked over to where Emily, visibly flustered, was trying to organize the line with frantic efficiency. What's going on here? Are they giving away free money and no one told me? Romulo joked, trying to lighten the tension he saw on Emily's face. She laughed briefly, clearly relieved to see that Romulo seemed to be well. You really do look better, she said with a smile, but now serious. Come in and see for yourself, I don't have time to explain right now. Intrigued and a bit disoriented, Romulo entered the restaurant and was immediately struck by the vibrant energy of the place. The space was fuller than ever, with all eyes on a central figure. Anna, dressed in a chef's outfit, was preparing meals in front of an attentive audience, while telling a story that seemed to completely capture everyone's attention. The delicious aroma of the food filled the air, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Anna was telling a story, and everyone was listening. Once upon a time, in a distant kingdom called Valoria, there was a princess named Alara. She was known for her kindness, beauty, and courage. The kingdom thrived under the wise rule of her parents, King Alden and Queen Seraphina. However, everything changed one fateful morning. Elara was in the castle gardens, picking flowers for her mother, when she heard screams coming from the great hall. She ran back to the castle, her heart pounding. Upon entering the hall, Elara saw a terrible scene. Her parents were disappearing. Their forms were fading into the air, leaving only a faint glow where they had been moments before.
Father! Mother!
Elara shouted, running to where they were, but all that remained was silence and a faint smell of paint. Desperate, she called for the guards and servants, but found that some of them had also mysteriously disappeared. The castle was in turmoil, and no one knew what was happening. Elara refused to accept the inexplicable disappearance of her parents, and decided to uncover the truth. She began to investigate on her own. Her suspicions soon fell on her older brother, Cedric, who had always been ambitious and envious of their parents' power. One night, Elara heard faint footsteps coming from the castle's highest tower, a place no one usually went. She followed the sounds and found Cedric talking to a strange man with an artistic appearance, holding a palette of colors and brushes. Hidden in the shadows, Elara listened to every word. "The work is nearly complete, my prince," said the painter, his voice low and hissing. "Soon all who oppose you will be trapped in my paintings, and you will be the sole heir to the throne." Cedric smiled a cold and cruel smile. "Excellent. Continue your work, Alistair. I want to see all those who doubted me paying the price." Elara was horrified. She realized that the painter Alistair had magical powers that allowed him to capture people's souls in his paintings. Her parents and the missing servants were all trapped in paintings scattered throughout the castle. Determined to free them, Elara waited until Cedric left and confronted Alistair. Using her intelligence and courage, she managed to deceive the painter into believing she was on Cedric's side. She asked to see the paintings, claiming she wanted to ensure that her parents were indeed trapped in them. Romulo was about to get engrossed in Anna's story when Emily, apparently having resolved the immediate issues with the line, pulled him into the office to finally explain the situation. "Hey, I want to hear the story," he said like a child, but Emily pulled him along. Once in the office, with the door closed to muffle the noise from the restaurant, Romulo asked, still incredulous, "How did all this start?" Emily took a deep breath, clearly emotional about the recent events. "It all happened by accident, Romulo. One day, a few of us arrived early and found Anna cooking in the main kitchen. Luana was sitting at the table, listening to her mother tell a story while preparing breakfast. Anna had apologized for using the kitchen but offered breakfast to everyone, an offer no one refused given the inviting aroma filling the room. As she cooked, she continued her story. Everyone was fascinated, listening and watching. However, when she finished cooking, the story wasn't over. All the staff begged her to continue, but she joked that there were customers waiting. Emily smiled, remembering the moment. But the staff opened the doors and invited the customers to come in. They also wanted to hear the end of the story. So, Anna started again, this time with more listeners. And that's how it all began. People not only loved the food but the way she told the stories created an incredible atmosphere. Romulo listened intently, almost not believing in the spontaneous transformation of his restaurant. "And then?" he asked. "Then someone did a report about it, and the next day the place was full even before we opened the doors. It seems people are looking for not just a meal but an experience, something that makes them feel like they're at home in the kitchen with family," Emily explained, clearly surprised and happy with the unexpected success. Emily herself said she felt like she was with her late grandmother, Romulo continued. Her grandmother loved to cook, and Emily used to go to the kitchen to hear the stories her grandmother told about the past. Emily sighed deeply and said that nowadays that's becoming increasingly rare. She said Anna tells stories of various kinds, romances, dramas, and also about her own life. Everyone gets emotional. Plus, her food is delicious. Romulo felt a wave of conflicting emotions. On one hand, there was the grief over the loss of the restaurant as it was before. On the other, a sense of pride and admiration for what the place had become under such unexpected circumstances. "This is amazing, Emily. Truly amazing," he said finally, his voice laden with a mix of admiration and melancholy. Emily placed her hand on Romulo's shoulder.
It's a beautiful legacy, Romulo. A beautiful ending to the story of Rose Gourmet.
Romulo nodded, feeling somehow reassured and revitalized by the new life his dream had taken on. Although the restaurant as he knew it was ending, the essence of what he always wanted to offer, a place of communion and sharing, seemed to have found a new way to continue. At the end of a surprisingly busy day at Rose Gourmet, Romulo found himself with Anna, whose stories had filled the space with a warmth and vitality he had never imagined possible in its final days of operation. His curiosity about the origin of these captivating narratives led Romulo to ask Anna where the stories came from. "I've always loved listening to the stories my parents and grandparents told," Anna explained with a melancholic smile. "They passed away, one after the other, and after them, there was not much left but memories. Books and movies have always been my favorite refuges, but when everything else failed, the stories stayed with me." She paused, looking at Luana, who was playing contentedly in a corner of the restaurant. "When Luana and I were homeless, I tried to protect her from the harsh reality with these stories. In the toughest times, when hunger was pressing, my stories were the only escape, making her forget our situation for a moment." Romulo listened, deeply touched by Anna's strength and resilience. He admired how she turned her adversities into something that brought comfort not only to her daughter but now to everyone who visited the restaurant. After closing the restaurant that night, neither Romulo nor Emily could go home. They stayed there, lost in thought, searching for some miraculous solution that could reverse the impending sale of the restaurant. However, the hours passed without bringing the needed inspiration. The following days passed in a blur, with the restaurant attracting more visitors than ever, but the scarce time did not allow for raising enough to cover Romulo's debts. When the final day arrived, the reality of the end hit hard. Romulo, with a heavy heart, signed the papers transferring ownership of his beloved restaurant. Still, his greatest concern was the future of Anna and Luana. However, before he could approach them to offer any kind of support, Emily took the lead. She approached Anna with a generous offer. "I have a spare room in my apartment, currently used only for storing boxes. If you and Luana have nowhere to go, I'd love for you to stay with me," Emily offered sincerely. Anna, visibly relieved and grateful, accepted the offer with a smile, while Luana hugged Emily in thanks. Romulo felt relieved knowing they would be safe. In the days that followed, Romulo found himself in an increasingly difficult situation. With his savings dwindling, he spent his days sending out resumes, desperately searching for a job. It was during this period of uncertainty that Emily visited him, concerned about his well-being. "How are you, Romulo? Not just financially, but are you doing okay?" Emily asked, genuinely worried. Before he could respond fully, she quickly changed the subject. "There's a place I'd like to show you. It might seem strange now, but I think it's important." Confused but trusting Emily's intentions, Romulo followed her in the car. The drive led them to where the Rose Gourmet once stood, now a construction site, where the restaurant was being demolished to make way for a parking lot. Romulo watched with a heavy heart as the machinery tore down what had once been the stage for so many memories and stories. "Why did you bring me here, Emily?" he asked, his voice tinged with sadness. Emily looked at him with sympathy in her eyes. "I know it's painful, Romulo, but I thought seeing this might somehow help you close this chapter so you can start thinking about the next one, without being stuck on what was lost." Romulo, though shaken, recognized the intention behind Emily's words. Together they stood there, watching the end of an era, but somewhere within Romulo, the seed of a new beginning was starting to sprout, even though he was still uncertain about where and how it would flourish. After leaving the construction site where Rose Gourmet had been dismantled, Emily drove a bit further, a cautiously hopeful smile on her face. Romulo, sitting beside her, was still absorbed in the melancholy of seeing his old restaurant being demolished, unaware that Emily had other plans. "I'm hungry. How about we stop somewhere to eat?" Emily suggested, breaking the silence that had settled between them. Romulo agreed, seeking distraction. They stopped at a small restaurant that seemed cozy and inviting. As they walked in, Romulo barely had time to take in the surroundings before he was surprised by an enthusiastic chorus of surprise from all corners of the room. There were all his former employees, including Anna and Luana, smiling and waving at him. Confused, Romulo looked at Emily, searching for explanations.
How?
He asked, a mixture of joy and bewilderment in his voice. Emily, with a triumphant glint in her eyes, revealed. This restaurant is yours now, Romulo.
Romulo blinked, incredulous. What do you mean?
Emily began to explain. I've always been cautious with money, so I had a good savings. With the final days of our old restaurant, especially with Anna helping, we managed to gather a significant amount. This place was for sale, and Anna helped me realize that sometimes it's better to start anew. But the money wasn't enough to cover all your debts, Emily continued, so we decided to use what we had to invest here, in this new beginning.
I want you to be my partner, Romulo. We'll split everything 50-50ths. Romulo was speechless.
Emotion overwhelmed him, and he hugged Emily, grateful beyond words.
You're an angel, Emily. Of course, I accept.
At that moment, Luana approached, her eyes shining with excitement.
Can I eat here too? She asked innocently.
Of course, Luana, whenever you want, Romulo replied, laughing, as preparations for the new restaurant's opening began around them. Emily then remembered something. Romulo, there's one more thing you need to know, she said, handing him a phone with a news article open. It was a report about the arrest of a gang involved in a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Among those arrested was Deborah, or rather Kasia, as she was actually named. I did quite a bit of investigation after everything that happened, Emily explained, and she's been arrested. Her assets are being seized to compensate the victims. You might have a chance to recover some of the money you lost. Romulo felt a mixture of relief and justice as he read the news.
Thank you, Emily.
I don't know how I can ever repay you for everything you've done, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. A year had passed since the restaurant's reopening, and the new establishment had transformed completely. It was now a spacious and beautiful place with a waiting list extending for months. Anna, with her unique ability to tell stories while cooking, had become an integral part of the restaurant, eventually becoming the third partner. With the business's success, she was able to buy a house where she lived with Luana. Romulo and Emily, united not only by a business partnership but also by a growing affection, were now dating. Every weekend, they would meet at Anna's new home, where she prepared delicious meals accompanied by cheerful conversations and warmed hearts. These gatherings had become more than just get-togethers. They were celebrations of a new life, of overcoming challenges, and of a promising future born from the ashes of a difficult past, but never forgotten. And if you liked this video, subscribe to the channel, like, comment and share this story.